Some weapons were considered far too powerful to be made by human hands. We are about to uncover 25 legendary artifacts, each believed to be forged by divine hands. By the end of this journey, you will understand why these stories of God-made weapons captivated entire civilizations and what they reveal about our deepest fears and desires. We will see how a single sword could confirm a king's right to rule, and why a hammer was used for both destruction and blessing. What do you believe it means to hold a power that is literally heaven sent? The idea of a god crafting a weapon is profoundly different from a mortal doing the same. A human smith might forge a sword of fine steel, but a divine smith was shaping destiny itself. These figures were far more than celestial toolmakers. They were architects of reality. Hephaestus, the limping god of the Greek forge, did not merely hammer shields. He created living, breathing automata and weapons of unbreakable power. In Hindu tradition, Vishvakarma was the divine engineer of the entire universe, the master builder for the gods themselves. When such a being turned their attention to a single blade or arrow, they were not just working metal, they were weaving cosmic principles into a tangible form. Their workshops were never ordinary places. They were located in the hearts of volcanoes, where the earth's raw fire met the underworld, or in celestial realms beyond human sight. This setting was crucial. It symbolized the transformative, almost alchemical nature of their work. They used materials that were not of this world, metals fallen from stars or ores mined from the foundations of creation. The fire they used was not mere flame. It was the primordial energy of the universe. This foundational belief explains why a weapon from a divine smith was never seen as just a tool for war. It was an extension of divine will, a fragment of cosmic order given physical shape. To hold such an object was to hold a piece of a god's own authority, a responsibility as immense as its power. Buried in a waterlogged tomb for millennia, the Sword of Goujian defied all logic. When archaeologists unearthed it in 1965, they found a bronze blade from a time before empires, yet it was untarnished and deadly sharp. This was not a relic worn soft by time. It was a testament to a craftsmanship so advanced it seemed otherworldly. Legends whispered that such perfection could not be achieved by mortal hands alone, that the King of Yu had commissioned divine artisans, beings who knew the secrets of celestial metals. The intricate patterns on the hilt were not mere decoration. They were the signature of a power beyond human understanding. Imagine the weight of such a weapon in a king's hand, a blade that time itself could not touch. It was more than a symbol of military might. It was physical proof of a mandate to rule, a divine endorsement cast in unyielding bronze. In the brutal struggles of the Warring States period, a sword that never dulled and never rusted would be seen as a direct gift from the heavens. It promised not just victory in battle, but an enduring legacy. How would you feel holding a weapon that seemed to reject the very passage of time, a constant in a world of decay? The Sword of Goujian stands as a powerful beginning to our journey, a concrete example of how a single artifact can blur the line between human history and divine myth. From the silent endurance of a bronze blade, we turn to a legend born from water and stone. Excalibur is more than a sword, it is the very soul of a kingdom. Its story begins not with a forge, but with a test of divine will. The stone that held the sword was an impossible challenge, a declaration that no ordinary man could ever rule. When the young Arthur, who was not even a knight, pulled the blade free with effortless grace, it was not a feat of strength, it was an act of recognition. The weapon acknowledged its true master, proving that his right to rule came not from bloodline or battle, but from a higher authority. This moment transformed a simple piece of metal into a symbol of sacred sovereignty. But the sword in the stone was only the beginning of the legend. The weapon we know as Excalibur was given to Arthur later, emerging from the mists of a mystical lake. A hand belonging to the Lady of the Lake rose from the still waters to present the king with a blade forged in the otherworldly fires of Avalon. This act completed the cycle of divine endorsement. The first sword proved he was the rightful king, and the second, Excalibur, was the tool to defend that right. It was said the blade itself could not be dulled or broken, and its scabbard held an even greater power. As long as Arthur possessed the scabbard, he could not be harmed by any wound in battle. This detail is profoundly important. The magic was not purely offensive, it was protective. It suggests that true, divinely granted power is meant for preservation and justice, not just for conquest. Yet the story of Excalibur is as much about its end as its beginning. As Arthur lay dying after his final battle, he gave a solemn command. The sword was to be returned, thrown back into the waters from which it came. A lone arm rose from the lake to catch the hilt, and the blade vanished beneath the surface. This final act completes a sacred contract. The power was never owned, only borrowed. It was a divine gift on loan for a mortal lifetime, to be used for a sacred purpose and then given back. What does this cycle of bestowal and return truly tell us? It reveals a world where mortals are temporary stewards of a power far greater than themselves. A weapon like Excalibur was not a trophy to be kept, but a sacred trust to be honored, a constant reminder that even the greatest king is merely a servant to a higher order. While Arthur's sword was a sacred trust to be returned, the spear of the Norse All-Father was a declaration of absolute authority that could never be revoked. Gungnir was more than a weapon for Odin, it was the scepter of his rule, forged not by a god, but by the most skilled craftsmen in all the cosmos, the dwarf sons of Ivaldi. Its creation was an event of mythic significance. These dwarves were beings of such profound artistry that their work blurred the line between craft and magic, their forges echoing with the fundamental songs of creation. They did not simply carve wood and shape metal for Gungnir. They used materials gifted by the gods themselves, including sacred wood from the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree that holds the 9 realms together. Into this spear they carved powerful runes, symbols that held the very essence of cosmic laws. The result was an artifact of impossible perfection, a spear so perfectly balanced it felt like an extension of the wielder's own will, and blessed with a singular, terrifying property. Once thrown, it could never miss its target. This was not a matter of superior aim or favorable winds. It was an absolute, unchangeable fact of the universe. The flight of Gungnir was the manifestation of fate itself, an unstoppable force that carved a path directly from intention to inevitable outcome. How does this infallibility reflect the Norse worldview? In a culture that revered honor and accepted a predetermined destiny, or weird, Gungnir was the ultimate expression of that order. It represented a truth that could not be avoided, a promise that could not be broken, a strike that could not be dodged. This is why its power extended far beyond the battlefield. Odin would hurl Gungnir over the heads of enemy armies as a ritual start to combat, a symbolic act that dedicated the fallen to the god himself and demonstrated that the outcome was already sealed by divine will. More profoundly, oaths were sworn upon Gungnir. A vow made in its name was as unbreakable as the spear's own flight, binding the speaker with the full weight of cosmic consequence. To break such an oath was to defy the order of the universe, an act of chaos that invited ruin. So Gungnir stands in stark contrast to a protective blade like Excalibur. It was not a tool of defense, but an instrument of irrevocable decree. It embodied the harsh, beautiful, and unforgiving precision of Norse ideals, where a single, true throw could decide the fate of gods and men alike. The power to command the sea itself was forged into a 3-pronged spear. For Poseidon, the mighty god of the oceans, his trident was far more than a weapon. it was the scepter of his vast, liquid kingdom. Its creation was an act of cosmic war, hammered into being by the Cyclopes, divine one-eyed giants whose strength was matched only by their skill. They crafted this masterwork not for a mortal champion, but for the gods themselves, a decisive tool in their great war against the ancient Titans. When Poseidon grasped the trident, he held the concentrated essence of the sea's untamable power. With a single strike upon the waves, he could summon colossal tsunamis that would swallow entire coastlines. Yet with another gesture, he could create freshwater springs bubbling up from the deepest, driest earth to give life to a parched land. This duality is the very heart of the trident's meaning. The sea was both the source of all life and a merciless, unpredictable destroyer. The trident embodied both of these truths without contradiction. It was a tool of both creation and chaos, reflecting the tempestuous nature of the god who wielded it. This dual purpose extends even further into the earth itself. When enraged, Poseidon would drive his trident into the ground, shaking the very foundations of the world and causing devastating earthquakes. But from that same violent impact, he could also bring forth the first horses, noble creatures that became sacred to him. So the trident governed not just the salt sea, but the fresh waters and the solid land, a symbol of his far-reaching and often volatile influence. What does this multifaceted power reveal about the people who told these stories? The ancient Greeks lived at the mercy of the natural world, and the trident was their way of giving a face and a tool to the immense, impersonal forces that governed their survival. They saw the sea not as a mindless element, but as a conscious, willful presence, its moods and rages directed by a god whose instrument could calm or churn the waters with a thought. A weapon like this was never about simple combat. It was about the ultimate authority over the elemental chaos of nature itself. It was the divine key that unlocked both the nurturing and the terrifying faces of the world. The authority of the sea gives way to the ultimate judgment of the sky. Zeus did not simply throw lightning, he cast thunderbolts, and the distinction is everything. These were not random acts of nature but deliberate, crafted instruments of divine will. Forged in the heart of the volcanic forges belonging to the Cyclopes, these jagged, fiery projectiles were the physical embodiment of his supreme power. The one-eyed giants did not create mere weapons, they concentrated the raw chaos of the storm into a focused tool of cosmic law. Each bolt was a verdict waiting to be delivered, a piece of celestial order given terrifying form. They were stored in a special case carried by a majestic eagle, a constant reminder that the king of the gods held the power of final judgment always at his side. The thunderbolt was the ultimate enforcer of divine justice, the tool Zeus used to punish hubris and avenge broken oaths. When a mortal or even a god grew too arrogant, believing themselves beyond the reach of fate, the thunderbolt was the answer. It was a swift, decisive, and utterly final response to any challenge against the established order of the cosmos. Think of the Great War against the Titans, a conflict that shaped the very structure of the world. It was the thunderbolts of Zeus, hurled with unimaginable force, that shattered the ancient Titans and secured victory for the Olympian gods. This was not merely a battle, it was the imposition of a new world order, a system of law and hierarchy over primordial chaos. So what does this tell us about the nature of such power? The thunderbolt was never about petty vengeance. It served a higher purpose, maintaining a delicate and necessary balance. It was the cosmic counterweight to chaos, the guarantor that oaths sworn in the gods' names would be upheld, and the final argument against any who sought to overturn the natural hierarchy of the world. It illustrates a profound truth in these ancient beliefs, that true power is not just the ability to destroy, but the responsibility to impose a just and lasting order. How does a weapon become the guardian of cosmic law, and what happens when that same power is borrowed by a mortal hero? That is a story of ambition and fire that would shake the heavens themselves. Even the chaos of a trickster could not diminish the perfect power of a hammer meant to guard the worlds. Mjolnir, the mighty weapon of Thor, stands apart from every other divine artifact because its creation was a story of sabotage that backfired spectacularly. The dwarf brothers Brokkr and Eitri were masters of their craft, but they worked under the mischievous gaze of Loki, who had bet his own head that they could not create treasures to rival those of other smiths. As the brothers labored at their forge, Loki, desperate to win his wager, transformed into a biting fly. He stung Brokkr on the eyelid, causing the dwarf to flinch and interrupt the rhythmic pumping of the bellows for a single, crucial moment. That instant of distraction was enough. The handle of the great hammer they were forging emerged too short, yet this apparent flaw did not break the weapon, it defined its legend. Mjolnir was still devastatingly powerful, capable of leveling entire mountains with a single blow and summoning the fury of the storm with a swing, but its shortened grip made it a weapon that required immense skill and strength to wield. It was uniquely, unmistakably Thor's. The hammer would always return to his hand when thrown, an unbreakable bond between god and tool that Loki's trickery could not sever. This story reveals a profound truth, that perfection is not about being without flaw, but about how a supposed weakness is integrated into an object's ultimate purpose. The short handle made Mjolnir legendary, a testament to Thor's own raw, unrefined power. But the true wonder of Mjolnir lies in its dual nature. It was a weapon of awesome destruction, yes, the primary defense against the giants who sought to bring chaos to the realms of gods and humans. Yet it was also one of the most sacred objects in Norse culture. This very same hammer that could shatter a mountain was gently laid in the lap of a bride to bless her marriage. It was used to consecrate the grounds for a new home, to hallow the funeral pyres of the dead, and to sanctify oaths. How could one object hold such contradictory roles? The answer is found in the Norse worldview, which did not see a clean separation between the destructive and the protective. To them, a potent force was simply a potent force, and its application determined its moral quality. The power that shattered a giant's skull was the very same power that safeguarded a family's future. Mjolnir was not just a weapon, it was a concentrated symbol of order against chaos, a divine tool that could violently enforce boundaries or gently sanctify them. This is why small amulets in the shape of the hammer were among the most common personal items found across the Viking world. People wore them not as symbols of war, but as tangible pieces of divine protection, a way to carry a fragment of Thor's guardianship with them into their daily lives. The hammer bridged the gap between the cosmic and the commonplace, making the divine a constant, accessible presence. So Mjolnir teaches us that a truly divine instrument is never just one thing. Its power is not limited to a single function, but flows into every aspect of existence, from the thunderous clash of battle to the quiet vows that build a community. The Spear of Lugh was a power so alive and ravenous it could never be left unattended. Forged for the Irish god of all arts and skills, this weapon was not merely a tool of war but a living force of consumption. Legends say it burned with such a fierce, internal fire that it had to be kept constantly submerged in a cauldron of water, its own thirst for destruction so great it would turn on the world itself if left unchecked. This was a divine instrument that embodied a terrifying truth, that ultimate power is often a wild thing, requiring constant and deliberate restraint. The spear was one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, a race of beings who brought magic and mastery to Ireland, and its promise was absolute. It guaranteed victory to the one who could wield it. But that guarantee came with a grave responsibility. To hold the spear was to hold a caged inferno, and the moment you forgot that, the moment you grew careless, its hunger would become your own undoing. Lugh's greatest test came during the Second Battle of Mag Tuaoird, a cosmic conflict against the oppressive Fomorians. His own grandfather, the tyrant Balor, possessed a monstrous eye whose gaze could lay waste to entire armies. It was a power of pure, mindless annihilation. Lugh did not meet this force with brute strength. He used his unparalleled skill, his mastery of every art, to approach his grandfather with precision. He did not throw the spear wildly. He used it as a focused instrument, driving it into Balor's deadly eye and ending his reign of terror. In this single act, the spear's nature was perfectly expressed. It was not the spear alone that won the day, but Lugh's wisdom in directing its voracious energy. The victory was one of skillful light over oppressive force, of controlled application over raw, unchecked destruction. So what does this tell us about the nature of mastery? The spear forces us to confront the idea that our greatest strengths, our own talents and powers, can be just as dangerous if left unmanaged. The cauldron of water was not a prison for the spear. It was a necessary tool for its existence in the world. It symbolizes the discipline required to channel any great ability, the conscious effort to cool the fires of our own potential so they do not consume us and everything we hold dear. How do we keep our own inner fires from burning out of control? The story of Lugh's spear suggests that true power is not about possessing a formidable tool, but about possessing the even more formidable wisdom to know how and when to use it. Restraint is a theme echoed in a blade that was never meant for battle. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Japan's sacred grass-cutting sword, is one of the most revered and secretive objects in the world. Its story begins not in a godly forge but within the body of a monster. The storm god Susanoo discovered it in the tail of the eight-headed serpent, Yamata no Orochi, after a cunning victory. This origin tells us something crucial. The sword was not made by divine hands but was a divine power hidden within chaos, waiting to be claimed and purified. It was a prize wrested from the heart of darkness itself. The blade's most famous legend is where it earns its name. A prince, trapped in a field set ablaze by his enemies, used the sword not to fight but to survive. With a single swing, he did not cut down his foes, he cut down the grass around him, creating a firebreak that saved his life. In that moment, the sword revealed its true character. It was an instrument of salvation, not slaughter. Its power was one of cleverness and control, specifically the command over the wind, which could be directed to spread a fire or to snuff it out. This established a profound principle. The greatest divine power is often the one that preserves life, not the one that takes it. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi is one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the physical proof of the emperor's divine right to rule, passed down through an unbroken lineage for centuries. Yet, unlike a crown displayed for all to see, the sword is kept utterly hidden, enshrined in a sealed container within the great shrine at Aegis. No living eye is permitted to look upon it. This secrecy is its ultimate power. What does this profound concealment truly mean? It means that the authority of the emperor does not come from a visible symbol that can be challenged or stolen. It comes from an unseen, eternal connection to the kami, the sacred spirits of Japan. The sword's existence is a matter of faith, and that faith is the true foundation of its legitimacy. The monarchy is not upheld by the sword's sharpness, but by the unshakable belief in its sacred presence. It represents a contract between the people, their ruler, and the divine, a contract that remains powerful precisely because it is never subjected to the crude test of reality. It exists in the realm of pure myth, where its power is absolute and unchanging. This hidden blade forces us to ask, is a symbol's power magnified when it is never seen, when its entire authority rests on our collective belief in its existence? A true weapon needs no sharpened edge to change the course of fate. The Caduceus, the golden staff of the Greek god Hermes, redefines power entirely. Far from a tool of war, this artifact was a master key for the soul itself. A gift from the god Apollo, it was forged not for battle, but for influence, its two entwined serpents representing the delicate balance of opposing forces. With this staff, Hermes could guide the recently deceased to the underworld, a solemn duty that required not force but gentle persuasion, yet its power was far more versatile. He could charm both gods and mortals into a deep, enchanted sleep or rouse them to instant wakefulness. This control over consciousness itself made him the ultimate messenger and mediator. Think of the immense power in being able to calm a raging conflict with a mere gesture, to soothe a furious god or placate a hostile army without a single drop of bloodshed. The Caduceus was a weapon of diplomacy, its true strength lying in its ability to resolve disputes and broker peace. It was the symbol of commerce, of negotiation, of the sacred art of finding common ground. How does this staff challenge our typical notions of a weapon? It forces us to expand our definition beyond physical force. Here, power is not about breaking an enemy's will, but about guiding it, about weaving understanding from the threads of conflict. The Caduceus reminds us that influence and persuasion are profound and ancient forms of power, perhaps even more potent and enduring than the mightiest sword. This concept of a weapon that heals and unites finds a powerful echo in another culture, where a single arrow was said to carry the weight of an entire empire's divine mandate. The bow of Apollo reveals a power that could both wound and mend with the same unerring grace. Forged by the divine smith Hephaestus from the finest celestial silver, this was no ordinary weapon. Its form was a masterpiece of art, a perfect curve that sang with tension, yet its purpose held a profound duality. As the god of archery, music, and prophecy, Apollo embodied the union of creative and destructive forces, and his bow was the ultimate expression of this paradox. Its arrows, sometimes seen as the concentrated rays of the sun itself, could deliver pestilence upon an entire city, punishing mortal arrogance with swift, terrible justice. The story of Niobe stands as a stark example, where a mother's boast led to Apollo and his sister Artemis using their divine bows to cut down her 14 children, a brutal lesson against challenging the gods. Yet those very same arrows could also bring an end to suffering, cleansing a plague or perhaps even, in their own mysterious way, offering the solace of a swift and fated end. This was not a contradiction but a complete picture of divine authority, where the power to harm and the power to heal were two sides of the same polished silver stave. The bow's unerring accuracy, granted by its otherworldly materials, meant its strikes were never accidents. They were always deliberate acts, whether for punishment or for protection. What does this teach us about the nature of such divine tools? It suggests that true mastery lies not in choosing between creation and destruction, but in understanding their essential connection. Apollo's bow was an instrument of music in its own right, its twang a deadly note in a symphony of cosmic order, its flight a verse of prophecy made real. It forces us to see that aggression, when channeled through the lens of art and purpose, becomes something more than mere violence. It becomes a form of terrible, beautiful truth. How do we reconcile the artist's hand with the warrior's aim? The bow of Apollo presents them not as opposites, but as inseparable partners in the exercise of a power that sees everything with perfect, unforgiving clarity. Even the most formidable offense could be shattered against a defense that struck with pure terror. The Aegis was not a simple shield. It was a moving fortress of psychological warfare, a divine artifact whose very presence could decide a battle before the first spear was ever thrown. Crafted by the master smith Hephaestus for his father Zeus, and later wielded most famously by the goddess Athena, the Aegis was both a breastplate and a shield, forged from the impenetrable hide of a divine goat and edged with golden tassels that shimmered with latent power. But its true heart was the Gorgonean, the severed head of the monstrous Medusa, fixed squarely at its center. This was not a mere trophy, it was a captured force of nature. The Gorgon's visage, with its serpent hair and stony gaze, was permanently frozen in a silent scream, a weapon of mass paralysis that turned the Aegis into a portable field of petrification. Imagine facing a phalanx not with the courage of men, but with the cold dread of facing a monster that could stop your heart with a look. The terror it inspired was not a side effect, it was the entire point. When Athena would charge into battle, she did not merely raise the Aegis to block attacks, she would shake it violently. The motion would unleash a storm, a cacophony of thunder and wind that mimicked the wrath of Zeus himself, a sensory assault that could break the spirit of the most disciplined army, sending them into a chaotic, mindless retreat. This artifact perfectly embodied Athena's domain as the goddess of strategic warfare. She represented not brute strength, but the application of wisdom and cunning in combat. Why waste energy in a prolonged melee when the enemy's will could be broken with a single, terrifying display? The Aegis was the ultimate expression of this philosophy, proving that the most efficient victory is often the one where the enemy is convinced to defeat themselves. This divine protection was even loaned out, a rare act of divine intervention. The hero Perseus, on his quest to behead Medusa, was gifted the Aegis by Athena. He used its reflective, polished surface not as a shield, but as a mirror, allowing him to navigate the Gorgon's deadly gaze and complete his impossible task. In this single story, the Aegis reveals its multifaceted nature. It was a tool for defense, a source of terror, and an instrument of ingenious problem-solving. It forces us to ask, where does true power lie? Is it in the force of a blow, or in the ability to make your opponent too afraid to even raise their own weapon? The Aegis stands as a timeless testament to the idea that the mind is the first and most important battlefield. A weapon forged for a single, impossible purpose, the harp was a divine sickle sword given to the hero Perseus. Its entire existence was focused on one task: to sever the head of the Gorgon Medusa, a being whose very gaze could solidify flesh into cold, unfeeling stone. This was not a blade for open battle against mortal armies. It was a surgical instrument for a cosmic operation, designed to excise a specific, monstrous evil from the world. Forged by the gods, some say by Hermes himself, the harp was made of materials that could ignore the innate magical defenses of such a creature. Its edge was not merely sharp, it was honed on the very principles of reality, allowing it to cut through enchantments that would turn aside any mortal steel. This specificity is what makes the harp so fascinating. The gods did not give Perseus an all-powerful weapon. They gave him the right tool for a very specific job. His quest was a carefully orchestrated divine intervention. He received winged sandals to fly, a cap of invisibility to hide, a mirrored shield to safely view his target, and finally, the harp to deliver the decisive blow. Every piece was essential. The story of Perseus is not a simple tale of a strong hero overcoming a monster through brute force. It is a lesson in meticulous preparation and accepting help. He could not have succeeded without the guidance and tools provided by the divine. His courage was not in his strength alone, but in his wisdom to use the gifts he was given with precision and timing. He flew in unseen, used the reflection in his shield to locate the monster without meeting her eyes, and in one swift, sure motion, the harp fulfilled its singular destiny. The aftermath of this deed echoes the weapon's profound significance. After its purpose was served, the harp was not simply discarded or lost. Legends say it was placed among the stars, immortalized as the constellation we know as the sickle. Its ascension to the heavens signifies that the act was not just a personal victory, but a cosmic service, a correction to the natural order that deserved a permanent mark in the night sky. So what does this specialized blade reveal about overcoming our own invincible foes? The harp teaches us that the greatest challenges are rarely conquered by raw power alone. They require a strategy, the right tools, and often the willingness to accept guidance from those who have walked the path before us. It asks a profound question: are we struggling because the task is too great, or because we have not yet sought out the specific key crafted for that particular lock? True power lies in knowing what instrument to use and having the humility to ask for it when the need arises. Even a king's throne could become a scaffold in an instant. The Sword of Damocles hangs not from a divine hand, but from the thinnest thread of human anxiety. This legendary blade, suspended by a single horsehair above a courtier's head, was never meant to be swung in battle. Its power came not from a divine forge, but from a psychological torment orchestrated by the Sicilian tyrant Dionysius II. The story is a stark parable, a lesson taught to the flattering courtier Damocles, who envied the king's immense power and luxurious life. Dionysius offered him a taste of that supreme authority, allowing Damocles to sit upon the throne and enjoy a lavish feast. Yet the king ensured that his guest could never forget the true cost of such a position. Above the throne, a gleaming sword pointed directly downward, held in place by nothing more than a fragile strand of horsehair. The message was terrifyingly clear. For those who hold the highest power, there is no true peace or safety. Every moment of command is shadowed by the imminent threat of assassination, rebellion, or catastrophic failure. The sword represents the constant, invisible peril that is the tyrant's constant companion. How does this concept transform a weapon into a purely symbolic lesson? It forces us to see that the most dangerous blade may not be the one in your hand, but the one perpetually hanging over your head. This story brilliantly blurs the line between a physical object and an abstract terror, making the intangible fear of downfall into a tangible, visible threat. The imagery has echoed through centuries, from Roman philosophy to modern political discourse, because its truth is universal. It speaks to the immense, isolating burden of leadership, the idea that with great power comes not just privilege, but a form of perpetual, nerve-shredding dread. The sword asks a difficult question of anyone who desires control. Are you willing to live your entire life beneath that poised point, never knowing when the single, fragile thread of your fortune will finally snap? A single thrust transformed a soldier's spear into a conduit for divine grace. The lance of Longinus, the weapon that pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion, stands apart from every other legendary artifact. It was not forged in a celestial furnace or gifted by a god, but was likely a standard-issue Roman pilum, an instrument of brutal, mundane warfare. Its power was not born from its creation, but from its singular, fateful use. In that moment of contact, when the spear point confirmed the death of the Christian Messiah, the object itself was utterly transfigured. It was sanctified not by a god's hand, but by holy blood, becoming a relic of immense spiritual significance. This act inverted its entire nature. What was once a tool of finality and death became a symbol of everlasting life, a tangible connection to the promise of redemption and resurrection. Its new name, the Holy Lance, marked this complete rebirth. How could an object of execution become a vessel for salvation? The answer lies in the power of context and belief to rewrite an object's very soul. The legend of the lance grew over centuries, accruing a power that would ripple through history. It became known as the Spear of Destiny, and a formidable myth took hold that whoever possessed it and understood its secret would hold the power to decide the fate of the world. This belief made it one of the most sought-after relics in history. Roman emperors, including the great Constantine, were said to have sought its protection. Charlemagne was rumored to have carried it into countless battles, believing its presence guaranteed his invincibility, until the day he accidentally dropped it and met his end. This narrative of fated possession continued into the modern era, with figures like Adolf Hitler becoming famously obsessed with locating the lance, hoping to harness its purported power for his own dark ambitions. But the true power of the Holy Lance was never about military conquest. Its enduring legacy is its profound symbolism. It represents the ultimate transformation, where an act of violence is redeemed into a source of spiritual hope. The spear that drew forth blood and water from Christ's side is seen by theologians not as a weapon, but as an instrument that revealed the dual nature of the Messiah, both human and divine, and opened the gates of grace for humanity. The lance forces us to confront a compelling idea that divinity can touch the most ordinary and even the most terrible of objects, hallowing them through purpose and story. Its power was not inherent in its steel, but was bestowed upon it by the unwavering faith of millions. What does this tell us about the objects we venerate today? It suggests that the value and power we assign to things are often a reflection of the stories we tell and the beliefs we hold, proving that a legend can be forged not only in fire, but in the human heart. The fate of nations could rest on a single blade kept not in an armory, but in a temple. The Sword of Mars was the sacred heart of Roman military might, a divine artifact believed to hold the god of war's own favor. It was not carried by a general into the fray, but housed in the Regia, the ancient royal palace in the Roman Forum that served as the official residence of the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. This location was everything. The sword was not a tool for a soldier, it was a state relic, a direct line to the divine will of Mars. Its origins were lost in the mists of time, whispered to be a gift from the gods themselves, perhaps even forged in the same celestial fires that gave Rome its destiny. The power of this blade was so immense that only the Pontifex Maximus himself was permitted to handle it, and only during the most solemn religious ceremonies. This was not a matter of simple ritual, it was a profound act of pietas, the Roman ideal of sacred duty to the gods, to one's family, and to the state. Moving the sword was a way of reaffirming a sacred contract, a reminder that Rome's military successes were not merely the result of superior legions, but were divine rewards for their unwavering piety and correct observance of tradition. How does this reflect the core of Roman identity? For the Romans, religion and statecraft were inseparable. Victory was not just a military objective, it was a theological necessity, a sign that the gods approved of Rome and its people. The Sword of Mars was the ultimate symbol of this belief. Its very presence in the city was thought to actively sway the outcomes of distant wars, blessing the legions with courage and their strategies with success. But this divine guarantee came with a terrifying condition. The sword had to remain in its rightful place. To lose it, to have it stolen or desecrated, was considered an omen of absolute disaster, a sign that the gods had withdrawn their favor and that the very foundation of the Republic was crumbling. This belief shows the weapon's true function. It was a barometer of divine approval. Its security meant the state was secure. Its loss meant the contract with the gods was broken, and chaos would surely follow. The Sword of Mars forces us to see that for an entire civilization, the most powerful weapon was not always the one that drew blood on the battlefield, but the one that secured the blessings of heaven upon the nation itself. The Roman state's divine contract was secured by a single blade, but in the East, a weapon was designed not to defend a kingdom, but to shatter illusion itself. The Vajra is a thunderbolt made solid, a ritual object that began as the primary weapon of the Hindu king of the gods, Indra. In his hand, it was a celestial mace of unimaginable force, used to strike down the chaotic serpent demons of drought and release the nourishing rains upon the world. But the most profound origin story tells of its forging from a place of ultimate sacrifice. The sage Dadhichi, seeing the gods were powerless against a terrible demon, voluntarily gave up his own life. He meditated so deeply that his soul departed, leaving behind a skeleton of unparalleled spiritual purity. His bones were gathered and fashioned into the Vajra, an instrument created not from metal, but from the essence of selfless renunciation. This means its power was never merely destructive. It was fundamentally righteous, born from a conscious choice to give up everything for the protection of the cosmos. How does a weapon forged from sacrifice change its very nature? It becomes a tool that cannot be used for selfish ends, its strength forever linked to the cause of universal good. This transformation from a combat weapon to a spiritual instrument is most complete in Tibetan Buddhism. Here, the Vajra is rarely seen alone. It is almost always held in the right hand, paired with a bell in the left. This pairing is a complete philosophical system. The Vajra represents method, the active, compassionate means to engage with the world and overcome obstacles. The bell represents wisdom, the empty, luminous nature of reality that understands the illusion of those very obstacles. Together, they symbolize the union necessary for enlightenment, the perfect balance of action and insight. The Vajra's form itself is a map of the cosmos. Its central sphere signifies the fundamental unity of all reality, while the lotus blossoms at each end represent the phenomenal world emerging from that unity. The prongs that extend outwards can vary in number, but they always symbolize the piercing of ignorance, cutting through worldly delusions with the sharp, diamond-like clarity of a truth that cannot be destroyed. In ritual, a practitioner does not swing the Vajra to smash an enemy. They use it to visualize cutting through their own internal afflictions, their own greed, hatred, and confusion. It becomes a key to unlock higher states of consciousness, so the journey of the Vajra asks a powerful question of us all. Can the tools we once used for conflict be repurposed for our own inner peace? This divine instrument proves that the ultimate battle is not against external demons, but against the darkness within, and that the most powerful weapon of all is the one that turns inward to illuminate. Even a blade forged by demons could be turned toward a sacred purpose. The Shamshir-e Zomorrodnegar, the legendary emerald-studded sword of Persian epic, carries a paradox at its very heart. Its creation was an act of darkness, hammered into being by divs, powerful demonic beings who sought to craft a weapon of unmatched malice. Yet this same blade would become an instrument of divine protection, a tool used by the greatest heroes to cleanse the world of the very evil that created it. This beautiful, terrible weapon was encrusted with emeralds, but these were not mere decorations. The gems pulsed with a neutralizing energy, capable of rendering any poison inert, a crucial defense against the venomous monsters and treacherous sorceries the sword's wielder was destined to face. Yet its most defining feature was not its beauty or its protective magic, but its profound conditionality. The Shamshir-e Zomorrodnegar could only be lifted and used by a hero who was preordained for the task. It was a weapon that tested its user, a physical manifestation of fate itself. To even attempt to draw it without that sacred rite was to invite instant, catastrophic death. The great hero Esfandiar, after undergoing 7 immense trials to prove his purity and courage, was the one deemed worthy to wield it. With the emerald-studded blade in his hand, he became an unstoppable force for good, battling through a forest of perpetual darkness and defeating armies of demonic creatures. The sword did not grant him power he did not already possess. Instead, it unlocked the potential that fate had already written for him. What does this say about the Persian conception of destiny? It reveals a world where divine favor is not a passive gift, but an active partnership. A hero does not simply receive a powerful weapon. He proves himself worthy of the responsibility it represents. The sword's demonic origin adds a profound layer to this truth. It shows that even the darkest, most chaotic forces can be harnessed and redirected by a pure will toward a righteous goal. Evil, in its arrogance, forges the very tool of its own undoing, and a worthy hero is the one who seizes it. The Shamshir-e Zomorrodnegar is a perfect emblem of this cosmic balance, a glittering promise that no power is so corrupt that it cannot be redeemed by a heart aligned with destiny. Freya's story presents a god who willingly disarmed himself. As a deity of sunshine, rain, and bountiful harvests, his greatest weapon was a sword that could think and fight entirely on its own. Forged with that same dwarf craft that created Thor's hammer, this blade was the ultimate guardian, a tireless, intelligent defender that required no hand to wield it. It was the perfect tool for a peaceful god, a guarantee of safety that did not rely on personal aggression. Yet when Freya saw the giantess Gertha, whose beauty illuminated the entire world, he knew he had to possess her. Her father, however, would never permit the marriage without a bride price of unimaginable worth, and so Freya offered the one thing he knew the giant could not refuse, his self-fighting sword. In that single, fateful transaction, the god of fertility traded the instrument of his security for the object of his desire. He gained love but surrendered his power to defend the peace he represented. The consequences of this choice were absolute. When the final battle of Ragnarök dawned and the fire giants marched upon the gods, Freya stood defenseless. He was forced to face the demon Surt, who wielded a blade of pure flame, armed with nothing more than a stag's antler. The outcome was never in doubt. The god who gave away his sword to win a bride was cut down, his life and the summer he embodied extinguished forever. This myth forces a difficult question upon us: is any desire, no matter how profound, worth the price of your own protection? Freya's sword represents a power that operates independently, a system or an ally that works on our behalf without constant supervision. To give it away is to gamble that the world will remain peaceful, that the future holds no great threats. His story is a poignant lesson in the Norse worldview, where even the most well-intentioned sacrifice cannot alter a predetermined fate. It asks us to consider what we are sacrificing in our own lives for temporary fulfillment, and what guardians we might be giving up that we will desperately need when our own personal Ragnarök arrives. The Trishula holds the entire cycle of the universe on its 3 points. Wielded by powerful deities like Shiva, the destroyer, and Durga, the warrior goddess, this divine trident is far more than a weapon. It is a diagram of cosmic law. Forged not in a conventional forge but from raw cosmic energy, its very substance is the fabric of reality. The 3 sharp prongs represent the fundamental aspects of existence, a triad that governs all life, creation, preservation, and destruction. This is not a sequence but a simultaneous, eternal process. Creation cannot happen without the destruction of the old, and preservation is the delicate balance between the two. The Trishula embodies this eternal dance. In the hands of Shiva, it is the instrument that pierces through the heart of ignorance, evil, and the blinding ego. When the goddess Durga rides into battle against the buffalo demon Mahishasura, the Trishula in her hand is the final, decisive weapon that strikes him down. This is not a story of simple good versus evil, but of divine order triumphing over the chaos that arises when these fundamental balances are disrupted. The demon represents a force that has grown too powerful, throwing the cosmos into imbalance, and the Trishula is the tool that restores the natural order. How does this weapon integrate such profound metaphysical concepts into its very form? Its symbolism extends even further into the nature of time and consciousness. The 3 points are often seen as the past, the present, and the future, a reminder that the divine perceives all time at once, unbound by the linear flow we experience. In Hindu philosophy, they also represent the 3 gunas, the fundamental qualities that constitute the universe: sattva, which is purity and harmony; rajas, which is passion and activity; and tamas, which is inertia and darkness. Every being and every object is a mixture of these three qualities, and the Trishula represents the power to understand and transcend them. To hold this weapon is to hold the knowledge of the cosmos itself, a tool that can cut through illusion and reveal ultimate truth. It demonstrates that the most powerful divine artifacts are not merely tools of force, but physical manifestations of the deepest philosophical ideas, a concept that finds a startling echo in a weapon from another culture that was said to be forged from the very soul of a nation. A king who is not whole cannot rule. This was the unyielding law of the Tuatha De Danann, and it defined the tragic majesty of Nuada-Ergetlom, the silver-armed king. His sword was not merely a weapon, it was one of the 4 treasures brought from 4 mythical cities, a blade forged in the otherworldly fires of Findias and said to be so potent that once drawn, no one could escape its edge and no battle could be won against its bearer. It was the ultimate instrument of royal authority, an extension of a king's perfect and undivided will. Yet this very ideal became Nuada's curse. In the first battle of Mag Tuaid, he lost his right arm in combat. Despite his courage and his possession of the unstoppable sword, the kingship was stripped from him. A ruler with a physical blemish, no matter how honorably earned, was seen as a flawed vessel for the land's sovereignty. The kingdom itself would suffer if its leader was not physically complete. This reveals a profound and unsettling connection between the body of the king and the health of the realm, a belief that divine favor required a perfect form. Nuada's long exile was a period of profound reflection. He was given a prosthetic arm of pure, living silver, crafted by the healer Dian sect with such skill that it moved with the fluidity of flesh. This act of divine craftsmanship did more than restore his limb, it restored his eligibility. When he returned to the throne, he was Nuada-Ergetlom, a king made whole again not by nature but by art and magic. His sword was returned to his hand, its power once again legitimized by his restored physical perfection. The legends whisper that the sword itself had a conscience. It was said to blaze with a brilliant light in the presence of truth, illuminating deceit and guiding its wielder toward just victories. This was not a mindless tool of slaughter, but a moral compass forged in steel. It ensured that the king's unstoppable force was always coupled with righteous cause. So what does this intricate legend truly teach us? The Sword of Nuada forces us to confront the ancient equation of physical wholeness with the right to wield power. It speaks to a time when leadership was not just a matter of wisdom or strength, but of symbolic perfection, a human mirror of an unblemished cosmic order. The sword was the reward for that perfection, the divine tool that confirmed it. Its unstoppable nature was not a gift for a person, but a blessing for an ideal. A perfect weapon for a king who had to be made perfect again to deserve it. That spear was not a gift from the gods, but it carried a divine echo. Forged from the wood of a Mount Pelion ash tree, the Spear of Achilles was a weapon of such immense size and weight that no ordinary man could even lift it, let alone wield it in the heat of battle. Its origin story weaves a complex tapestry of heroic legacy. It was a gift to his father, Peleus, from the centaur Chiron, a being who was himself a bridge between the wild and the civilized, a mentor to heroes and a repository of ancient knowledge. When Peleus passed it to his son, he was not just handing down a weapon, he was transferring a destiny. This lineage from a wise centaur to a mortal king, and finally to a demigod, meant the spear existed in a space between the fully divine and the extraordinarily human. Its sheer physicality was a constant, visible reminder of Achilles' own nature, the son of a mortal king and the sea nymph Thetis. He was more than a man, yet not quite a god, and this spear was the perfect instrument for that liminal existence. In the thick of the Trojan War, it was this specific spear that decided the fate of heroes. Its most famous victim was Hector, the noble prince of Troy. Their duel was not just a clash of warriors, but a collision of two different worlds, the raw, near-divine power of Achilles against the human, patriotic duty of Hector. The Pelian ash spear was the tool that delivered that final, tragic verdict. So how does this blur the line between heroic and divine instrumentation? The spear itself was not magical. It did not return when thrown, it could not control the weather, and it offered no protection. Its power came entirely from the man who held it. It was a magnifier of his own inherent, semi-divine strength. A divine weapon often operates on its own rules, but a heroic weapon channels the unique potential of its wielder. It was legendary not because of what it was, but because of who used it. This draws a crucial distinction. The spear was a testament to what can be achieved when supreme mortal prowess is paired with an instrument worthy of it. It forces us to ask whether a hero makes the weapon legendary, or if the weapon helps to make the hero. In the case of Achilles, the answer is a profound fusion of both, a partnership where human skill and a uniquely inherited tool became an unstoppable force, proving that a legend can be forged as much by lineage and personal might as by direct divine intervention. A dragon's scales are said to be harder than any earthly steel. For St. George, a mortal soldier, to pierce that hide required a power beyond human forging. His sword, as depicted in countless icons and stories, was more than a simple blade of iron. It was a physical extension of his unwavering faith. In the most enduring versions of the legend, the weapon is described as being blessed by divine hands, its metal infused with a celestial light that could burn through the darkness of the supernatural beast. This was not a battle of brute force, but a spiritual contest given physical form. The dragon represented chaos, paganism, and the terror that preyed upon the innocent, and the sword was the divinely sanctioned instrument of order. With a single, faithful thrust, it did not just kill a monster, it symbolically pierced the heart of evil itself, freeing a captive community and restoring peace. How does this specific weapon illustrate the adaptation of older divine weapon motifs into new religious narratives? The story of St. George and his sword is a masterful fusion of ancient hero archetypes with Christian morality. The motif of a god-king slaying a chaos serpent is found in myths from Zeus defeating Typhon to Indra vanquishing Vritra. Here, that cosmic struggle is brought down to a human scale. George is not a god, but a man whose strength comes from his devotion. His heaven-sent sword becomes the symbol of that devotion in action, a tool that allows a faithful mortal to act as an agent of divine will. This adaptation served a powerful purpose. It made the concept of divine intervention feel accessible and immediate. It taught that with true faith, any righteous person could become a conduit for heavenly power, a protector of the vulnerable. The legend spread across cultures from Europe to the Middle East, and in each place the sword remained the constant symbol. It came to represent the core ideals of chivalry, where martial strength was bound to defend the weak and uphold the good. The sword was the physical promise that faith, when wielded with courage, could overcome any terror, no matter how immense or seemingly invincible. This blade asks us a compelling question. Where do we draw the line between a weapon of war and a symbol of salvation? For St. George, that line did not exist. His sword was both, proving that the ultimate power of a divine instrument may not be its ability to destroy, but its capacity to inspire hope and define virtue for generations. Even the mightiest demigod could find his greatest power in a simple, gnarled branch. The club of Hercules stands apart from the polished divine armaments of other gods, a weapon of brute force and earthy pragmatism. Unlike a blade forged in celestial fire, Hercules is said to have crafted his own primary tool, tearing an entire olive tree from the ground, roots and all, to create a cudgel of immense size and weight. This origin story is profoundly important. It speaks not of a gift bestowed, but of power claimed through sheer strength and resourcefulness. In some versions, the club was later blessed by a god like Hermes, granting it a form of indestructibility, but its soul remained that of a mortal-made instrument. It was the perfect weapon for a hero whose journey was defined by overcoming impossible challenges through a combination of raw might and clever ingenuity. Think of his first labor confronting the Nemean lion, a beast whose hide was impervious to any forged weapon. A sword would have been useless, a finely crafted spear would have snapped. Only the overwhelming, concussive force of the olive wood club could stun the creature, allowing Hercules to complete the task with his own hands. The club was not about finesse, it was about fundamental impact, a tool that translated his divine strength directly into world-altering results. What does this humble weapon reveal about the diversity of divine power? It teaches us that celestial might is not always delivered in a polished, ready-made form. Sometimes it is the raw potential of the earth itself, waiting for a hero with the strength to uproot it and the will to shape it for a greater purpose. The club symbolizes a different kind of divine connection, one built on action and adaptation rather than passive receipt of a godly artifact. It proves that true power can reside in the most unadorned of objects, so long as the hand that wields it is guided by an unbreakable will. No blessing comes without its shadow, and no curse is ever born without a purpose. The Sword of Tyrfing was a masterpiece of divine craft, but its very perfection was the source of its damnation. Forged by the dwarf brothers Dvalin and Durin for the king Svafalami, its creation was not a gift but an act of cruel extortion. The king trapped the dwarves, forcing them to work their celestial magic under threat of death. They complied, but their resentment was woven into the steel itself. They created a blade of impossible sharpness, a sword that could never miss its mark and could slice through stone and iron as if they were air. Yet as they presented it, they spoke a prophecy that would become its soul. Tyrfing would never be drawn without killing a man. It would be the cause of 3 great evils. And it would ultimately bring death to Svafalami himself. This was not a flaw in the craft, but a feature of its malicious intent. The dwarves had made a perfect instrument, then poisoned its legacy for all time. How does such a weapon challenge our belief in divine gifts? It forces us to see that power, when born from coercion, carries the seed of its own destruction from the very first hammer strike. The sword was a prisoner to its own nature, and so was anyone foolish enough to grasp its hilt. The saga of the hero Angantyr demonstrates this tragic bind. He carried Tyrfing, a weapon that made him undefeatable in battle, yet he knew its dreadful law. The blade had to taste blood every time it left the scabbard, even if that blood belonged to a friend or an innocent. This transformed the sword from a tool of war into a malevolent force with its own insatiable appetite. Angantyr's own death came not in combat, but in a grave mound where he was buried with the cursed blade, a final testament to its inescapable destiny. The sword did not discriminate between its wielder and its victim, it served only the curse. This is the ultimate cautionary tale of power without wisdom. A divine weapon is not a simple key to victory. It is a contract with forces far beyond human understanding. Tyrfing's story asks a harrowing question: what is the true cost of a guarantee? When you hold a power that cannot fail, that never misses, and that cuts through any obstacle, have you gained a tool, or have you become a servant to its unforgiving will? The gleaming edge of Tyrfing was a mirror reflecting the darkest truth of all, that some destinies are forged not in triumph, but in the cold, deliberate fire of a curse. A weapon can be a circle, a cycle, a promise that what begins must also end. The Sudarshana chakra, the radiant disk of the god Vishnu, is not forged of metal but of something far more fundamental, the dust of the sun and the concentrated thought of the creator god Brahma. It is a spinning wheel of cosmic law, a weapon whose very form is its function. This chakram does not cut through armies, it cuts through time itself, representing the endless, cyclical nature of creation, preservation, and dissolution. Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, holds this spinning disk on his index finger, a constant, silent reminder that his role is not to prevent change, but to guide it, ensuring that the great wheel of existence turns in accordance with Dharma, the principle of cosmic order and moral law. How does a spinning disk enforce morality? Its unerring flight is the manifestation of inevitable consequence. In the myths, when demons like Shambha and Nishumbha rise, threatening to overturn the balance of the world through their arrogance and might, the Sudarshana chakra is unleashed. It travels millions of miles in the blink of an eye, an unstoppable force of retribution that seeks out and annihilates the source of cosmic imbalance. Yet it always returns to Vishnu's hand, its duty complete. This return is as significant as its strike. The weapon is not lost or spent, it is recalled, signifying that divine justice is not a finite resource but a perpetual, ready force. The chakram's circular shape is a map of this eternal process. There is no true beginning and no final end to its motion, just as there is no escape from the consequences that flow from action. It encloses the universe, a boundary that chaos cannot cross. To be in its path is to be confronted with the ultimate truth of cause and effect. This divine instrument forces us to ask a humbling question: where do we stand in the great turning of the wheel? Are our actions in harmony with the greater balance, or are we, in our own smaller ways, creating the very chaos that such a weapon is destined to correct? The Sudarshana chakra is the ultimate symbol of a world governed by law, where protection and destruction are two notes in the same eternal song. These legendary weapons are far more than ancient tales, they are profound reflections of the cultures that gave them life. Each artifact acts as a cultural mirror, revealing the deepest values, fears, and aspirations of a civilization. The recurring theme of divine smithing was never just about superior craftsmanship, it was about legitimacy. A weapon from the gods was the ultimate certificate of authenticity for a ruler's authority. When Arthur pulled Excalibur from the stone, it was not a test of strength but a public declaration that his right to rule was sanctioned by a power higher than any human court. Similarly, Japan's sacred Kusanagi no Tsurugi, kept hidden from all sight, serves as the unseen bedrock of the emperor's divine mandate. Its power does not come from being displayed, but from the collective belief in its existence, a belief that reinforces the entire structure of the state. These objects answered a fundamental human need for a tangible connection to the intangible divine, a physical piece of evidence that the cosmic order was on your side. The specific qualities of these weapons further illuminate the character of their people. The Norse world, a place of harsh climates and predetermined fate, produced weapons like Mjolnir and Gungnir that embodied this worldview. Mjolnir was not just a hammer of destruction, it was a tool for blessing, for hallowing, for protecting the community from the ever-present threat of chaos. Its power was practical and direct, reflecting a culture that valued strength, honor, and the sanctity of oaths. Gungnir's unerring flight was the very embodiment of fate itself, an unstoppable force that represented a truth which could not be avoided. In stark contrast, the Greek pantheon, with its powerful and often capricious gods, created weapons that emphasized raw power and retribution. Zeus's thunderbolts were the ultimate enforcers of divine justice, swift and terrible punishments for hubris and broken vows. They were less about community protection and more about the absolute authority of the Olympian order, a reminder that challenging the gods was a fatal endeavor. Perhaps the most universal lesson woven into these legends is the concept of the sacred contract. Divine power was never given without a condition. The Sword of Damocles taught that with great authority comes perpetual peril, a constant anxiety that the thread of fortune could snap at any moment. The Celtic Spear of Lugh, which had to be cooled in a cauldron, symbolized the vital need for restraint, showing that even the greatest power must be managed with wisdom, lest its own hunger consume the world. And the cursed Sword of Tyrfing presented the darkest version of this bargain, a weapon of perfect function that enslaved its wielder to a destiny of bloodshed and tragedy. These stories are not simple fantasies, they are complex ethical frameworks. They taught that to hold power is to accept a profound responsibility, and that a gift from the gods is also a test of character. By examining these patterns, we see our own timeless struggles reflected in their gleaming surfaces, our own quest for meaning, for legitimacy, and for the wisdom to wield the power we are given, whatever form that power may take. From the shimmering blades of ancient kings to the thunderous hammers of gods, these 25 legendary weapons reveal a profound truth about our shared human journey. They are not merely a collection of fantastic tales, but a rich tapestry woven from our deepest fears, our highest hopes, and our eternal quest for meaning in a vast and often mysterious universe. Each artifact, whether a sword, a spear, or a sacred staff, serves as a unique cultural lens. Through them, we see how different civilizations grappled with the same fundamental questions. What is the true nature of power? Is our destiny written in stone, or can we shape it with our choices? And what are the responsibilities that come with touching the divine? The stories we have explored together teach us that these mythical weapons were never just tools for war. They were symbols of protection, like Mjolnir blessing a marriage. They were instruments of justice, like Zeus's thunderbolts punishing hubris, and they were profound explorations of authority, illustrating the delicate and often dangerous contract between mortals and the powers they worshipped. The cursed Sword of Tyrfing warns us of power born from coercion, while the hidden Kusanagi blade shows that true authority can rest on faith alone. As we reflect on these ancient echoes, consider how their themes resonate in our modern world. The allure of legendary power continues to shape the stories we tell today, from the epic conflicts in our films and books to the very frameworks we use to understand history and leadership. We still seek our own symbolic weapons, tools of influence and change that we hope will leave a lasting mark. I would love to hear which of these legendary artifacts captured your imagination. Was it the tragic destiny of Tyrfing or the wise restraint of Lugh's spear? Share your favorite in the comments below and let us continue this conversation. If these journeys into the mysteries of our past have sparked your curiosity, subscribe for more explorations into the legends that shaped our world. Carry these stories forward, for they are far more than forgotten myths. They are timeless testaments to the enduring power of human belief.